Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Whoa, here we go, Josh. It's been forever.
Forever. That's right. But hopefully this movie has enough in it that we can hit the ground running, because this is film with a capital F, because it's got a lot going into it. So we're talking about David Lowery's The Green Knight. Had you seen any other David Lowery movies before this? Have you seen The Ghost Story?
Yes, I loved it. I loved it. And the fact that Casey Affleck is underneath that sheet the whole entire time, that's literally him, is fascinating to me.
I have to confess, I fell asleep watching that movie and I never went back to it, but it is a movie that I definitely need to see, because after seeing this movie, I need to dive all in on David Lowery, I think.
Yeah, he has a voice.
Yeah.
He has a thumbprint. He has an attitude. There's a tone to his films, and we can talk more about that.
But this movie that we're talking about tonight is The Green Knight. It's based on a late 14th century Arthurian poem. It centers around Gawain or Gawarn.
Gawain.
Gawain. They say it like three different ways. It's
They totally do.
Yeah. So he's the nephew of King Arthur. He hasn't really been tested in battle yet, and he takes up a Christmas Day challenge given by this mythical Green Knight who comes in to the round table area, and Gawain ends up beheading the Green Knight, and he's expected to seek out the Green Knight a year later to receive a commensurate outcome. So that's the setup for this movie. And it's pretty much a quest movie, and it's showing Gawain as he moves towards getting to the Green Knight and Green Knight's Chapel. So it's been a while since I've seen a fantasy movie, and I would definitely consider this a fantasy movie. I know it's kind of like a, King Arthur Knights Around Table type thing too, but I mean, and that's the other thing, is I haven't really felt like going back to Lord of the Rings, and I didn't get into Game of Thrones, but right from the very beginning, the filmmaking, the cinematography, and the score all got me interested, and I was kept interested by all of the elements of the film, even though fantasy is not necessarily like my number one genre or anything like that. So how about you? How did it hit you?
Well, I love all the Lord of the Rings. I have visited them many times at this point. I've read the first book, which was difficult for me to read, so I didn't read The Two Towers or The Return of the King. Eventually, I'll get around to them. I'm a sci-fi fantasy kind of guy. I love King Arthur and the Round Table. I love Camelot the musical. The Once and Future King is great. I love everything about King Arthur and the legends and all of the movies. Excalibur, I've seen a gazillion million times. My English teacher in high school, his son was a friend of mine, and they invited me over to their house, well, a group of us over to their house for like a Sunday cookout. We all played volleyball, and it was really weird because he was like the English teacher, all buttoned up and talking about the fish imagery in Hamlet, which I still to this day don't understand, but that's what he talked about. And it was really odd because he smoked cigarettes. So to see Mr. Duncan smoking cigarettes was weird. Like he's like a real human being in a t-shirt and shorts and playing volleyball with his kids. It was weird. And then halfway through the day, he came out and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come here." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble." My English, I'm in trouble. And he goes, "Sit down. You're going to like this." And Richard Harris had performed in Camelot, and they filmed it and put it on PBS Great Performances. And he said, "You're going to be into this. I'll guarantee it." And I was obsessed. So the crazy part is that I remember this poem, this story, but I don't really remember specifically. I get this and Beowulf mixed up. And I remember it was Gawain in high school, and then Alicia Vikander says Gawain, and then a couple other people say it a different way. So I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, King Arthur says Gawarn.
Yeah, it's weird. It's totally weird, which made me feel a lot better because, me and names. But I did figure out how to say the one actor's name once we get to him. I know definitively how to say his name, and we'll get to it. So I love all of these legends, and I do remember the story, but I don't remember the reason why we read it. You know what I mean? So I don't really have a reference point for this story. When I realized that this was what this movie was about, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that, but I couldn't tell you anything. So going into it, it was good because it was a blank canvas. So he could have done anything and probably gotten away with it, but I think he's done a few things really well in this film.
It seems like it was the poem that it's based off of was a jumping off point for David Lowery. It wasn't something that he was holding himself to hard and fast. He was using that as a template. And the other thing is, it's not like it's the first time that this has been made into a film. There's one filmmaker that made 2 versions of a movie on this. The second one had Sean Connery as the Green Knight. So it's
Yep.
yeah, so it's not like it's something that David Lowery considered sacred, and it's not something that it's like the definitive version of this on film or anything.
That's interesting that you said that because he is absolved of any preconceived notion, because if you do any research on this, immediately on Wikipedia, the poem comes up as nobody knows who wrote it. Nobody knows when it came out. Nobody's sure what the green means. Nobody's sure what the knight means. No one's sure what the fox means. No one's sure what any of it means. There are all these interpretations, and all these scholars have come out over the years and said it's definitively this. And then like 20 years later, somebody goes, but if it's that, then what does that mean? Oh yeah, it can't be that because of that in the poem. So nobody knows. So it's a completely open screen to whatever you want to do. So that was good for me because I was a little worried. I was like, oh, am I going to have an English test after this? What is happening? But luckily it's not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you notice right off the bat. I mean, the first main scene at the Knights of the Round Table, it has a lot of symbology, and there's parallel scenes where Gawain's mom is doing her own kind of incantations in a separate tower, and then they're in their own place. So there's a lot going on, but at the same time, it's very purposefully paced, and we don't even really see the Green Knight until fairly late in that scene. So you know that David Lowery is not worried about keeping people engaged. I think that a lot of the shots that I saw at the beginning and the things that kind of established the look of this film, I noticed fairly early on that, number one, it was shot digitally as opposed to on film. And that gave David Lowery a lot of flexibility, and his cinematographer, Andrew Draws Palermo, gave them both a lot of flexibility as far as like certain shots that they could use, and especially low light scenes, really dark scenes. You still got a lot of detail in those. And so that helps out because once again, you're relying on torches and stuff like that. It's not like they've got, lights they can plug into the wall or anything. So that gives them a little bit more flexibility. And the other thing I noticed was that they were using spherical lenses. So I'm going to get a little dorky here real quick. But there's 2 different types of lenses that normally you can use. Anamorphic lenses, where they take the image and they kind of squeeze it together so that it can be stretched back out when it gets projected in a movie theater. Or they can use spherical lenses, which will essentially give you a more or less a square picture. And then when you watch it in a movie theater, they just chop off the top and the bottom. But they utilized a lot of shots where they were either looking up at the moon, or there were lights or single light sources coming down, to where you get those lens flares. So lens flares have been famously overused in certain things like Star Trek and stuff like that. The Star Trek lens flares are kind of like long and wide, and those would be anamorphic lens flares. But the lens flares in this movie were circular, were spherical. And so that told me a little bit about the lenses that they were using. And in looking up the camera that they were using, it's a really nice large format digital camera. And so they're able to get really, really high detail on a lot of these things that allowed them to do not only some really great compositions, but allowed them to even extend some of their scenes. And in reading about the CGI and how they did some of the CGI, they were trying to do kind of what, I'm going to bring him up again, David Fincher, kind of what David Fincher likes to do, which is hide the CGI. I mean, there's a fox in this thing that is completely CGI. And actually that's, when the fox isn't moving, it looks fine. But when the fox is like bouncing around, it looks a little weird. But that's really difficult to do, especially to have like a completely CGI character. But the CGI that I didn't even know was there, like there are certain scenes when you're behind King Arthur and he's kind of looking out at the door where the Green Knight is coming in. When they shot that, they only had a certain perspective, and they were barely able to get all the people around the round table in the shot. But when they looked at it, after the movie was shot, months and months later, David Lowery was like, I really want a bigger, wider shot. So what they did was they used CGI to put in painted doubles on the sides, on the left and right sides of the screen. And they kind of like zoomed out from what they shot and then filled in the left and the right sides with fake people. They weren't moving or anything, but it allowed them to reframe a shot, which is something I wouldn't have even thought about, because you would think that when you're on a set and you're creating these shots, like, it is what it is, and whatever's inside that camera, whatever's being captured inside that camera on a movie like this, I wouldn't have thought of using CGI like that. But that kind of stuff is innovative to me, that they would even have the wherewithal to say, I know this is what we've got, but it's not what I want, so let's figure out a way to make it what I want. And we can't go back. We can't shoot in this castle again because whatever, it's 6 months later. And then the last thing I'll point out is that as Gawain is going out on his journey, essentially, like right as he's leaving the city on his horse, in the background, you see the city in the distance. And I told Steph, I was like, that looks like a matte painting. Like when we talked about Adventures of Robin Hood, where they would do set extensions and matte paintings where, back then all they could do is take a piece of glass and paint on that piece of glass. And then that's what they would put in the frame to make it look like there's some huge castle in the background. But they purposefully used artistic means to, quote unquote, digitally paint that background. So they could have done like a 3D render and make it look perfect and make it look sharp and make it look realistic, like photorealistic. But they didn't do that. They were trying to come up with these kind of like chromatic aberrations that you would see in a matte painting from 1938 when Adventures of Robin Hood came out. And so that adds to the texture of the film. And that's the kind of stuff that makes me want to go back to A Ghost Story and figure out what else this guy's going to do with a whole movie about a guy in a sheet looking at his wife I mean, you know what I mean?
You're going to have to let that go, okay? Because that's not what the movie's about.
I know.
Seriously.
Okay.
Nowadays, you can use CGI to get there in a different way. So I like that. I like the fact that people are thinking out of the box, or there isn't even a box anymore. There is whatever's in your mind's eye. And I also like a filmmaker who can say, because I wonder sometimes how set in their ways, like somebody like David Fincher is, because when you see him interviewed or you hear him on those DVD extras, he's very particular and in a good way. And if it doesn't fit in this frame, no pun intended, it doesn't happen. But is he the type of director who can come back and say, okay, that shot is not exactly fully realized like I wanted it to be. Let's fix it.
Yep.
And obviously he is, because he goes back and does his own line readings and digitally does things. So I think that's impressive that your own artistic thought can be altered by what the need of the film is dictating to you when you rewatch it. I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to work.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And we're to the point now where people are a lot more capable of doing it. It doesn't cost as much money, and you're pretty much limited by your own thought. I mean, by your own artistic limitations, and that's where, I'm sure David Lowery and I know David Fincher and other great filmmakers understand that it's a collaborative medium and that they're not the be all end all. And if somebody's got a great idea, they're going to take it because that's what they're there for.
Well, ultimately this conversation is going to veer around to a 180 into my final thoughts, which are going to be, I'm not exactly sure what I was supposed to take from this film. I'm not exactly sure what the themes are. So I guess it depends on whatever the themes are that we're supposed to be taking, that scene was relevant or not, because there are 4 prominent women in this film, 2 being played by the same actress. And then Guinevere, King Arthur's wife. And then the mother, which is also switched around because that's Morgana Le Fay, who is the mystic sister of King Arthur, who had I thought she had a son by Arthur. I'm pretty sure she did. His name was Mordred, and he's what takes Arthur down eventually, or at least tries to. He's the fall of Camelot. So that's a little switched around. So I guess it depends on what the themes are.
All right. Well, so spoilers from now on. It's a beautiful film to watch, and we didn't talk about the score, but the score is also great. It was written by Daniel Hart, and it uses period accurate choral arrangements and instrumentation. And I thought that fit in perfectly, but they were still able to bolster the feelings that you're supposed to be feeling at any given moment. But yeah, that's definitely one of those scores that's going to go on my study / work hard type of a score, because it's a great film score.
I agree with you 100%. It's definitely a high point of the film, and it's definitely, you can hear the themes in the music. I'm just not sure what the visuals and what the story is telling me to back that up.
Well, okay, so I mean, obviously Morgana Le Fay, Morgana or Morgan? Morgan.
It's Morgan. Nowadays, it's Morgana Le Fay back in the day.
Okay, so
Gawain.
So that's
tomato.
So I think that's his mom trying to test him, and you know, setting it up from the beginning and understanding what he's going to do and seeing how he's going to react to the tests that will come, and him branching out from the safety of Camelot.
Okay, I got all that. That's sort of
101.
Yeah, well, I'm, not to sound condescending, but that's sort of the superficial. That's actually what happened. What's the purpose of why she does that? What is the reason behind why she does that? Why would she put her son in harm's way? Because that's the game. The game is, you strike me, and in a year I strike you. So if you strike me and kill me, then in a year I strike you and I kill you. So if he's up to the challenge of becoming a knight, then he's going to stand by his word. So if he agrees to take on this challenge, this Christmas challenge, then he should follow through, and she's going to know that he's going to die or he's going to get beheaded. So why does she do it?
She's creating the Green Knight, or she's incanting the Green Knight. So she understands we're already in spoilers. So she understands the rules of the Green Knight and how the Green Knight will react to Gawain based on Gawain's action before he gets to the point where he reaches a Green Knight a year from that Christmas day.
And once again, the question is, why does she do that?
Because she's set up a formula for which Gawain can be successful, where he understands that it's almost assured that he will die. Does he choose to hang all of his hopes on protection of others, or does he take responsibility for what he's done up to that point? Those are the two options. And so, him having some sort of a talisman, some sort of a thing around his waist that's supposed to help to protect him. Like he's always had that. He's been the nephew of the king. He's been the nephew of the most powerful person in the kingdom. And he's been able to live in Camelot and go bang Alicia Vikander as much as he wants with no repercussions or no responsibilities. He hasn't grown up. And so I think that's a really rough way of getting her son to grow up.
Yeah, but then she gives him the belt, the green belt with the rune in it.
That's part of the test. Okay, so he's got the walls of Camelot around him, right? So she says,
Okay.
all right, you need to, you're going to go out a year from now, but guess what? We've made this very nice thing it's got a rune, it's got all kinds of fancy stuff in there. It's going to protect you. Nothing you do is going to allow you to die because you're going to have this around you the whole time. So essentially he leaves the walls, the circular walls of Camelot, but he still has that sash encircling him, much like the walls of Camelot protected him. Now that he's outside of those walls, he has this other thing to protect him. But it's not the thing that protects him. It's his thought that the thing is protecting him that is allowing him to do some of the things that he's done.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. I just think, and we've talked about this a gazillion times, you can't spoon feed an audience, but at the same time, you do need to give them some indication of where to think or how to think, if you will, or what to think about.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it was more perplexing trying to figure out why the mother, who I now the truth of the matter is, since I know this legend and this idea of Camelot and Morgan Le Fay, of course she's the evil one in those stories. She captures Merlin and sticks him in the crystal cave and blah blah blah. So I don't like her. So maybe I have some kind of preconceived notion about her, but I would have liked something, a grain of salt, to indicate to me what exactly I should be extracting from why his mother would do this. And maybe it is as simple as he needed to grow up, he needed to get outside the walls of Camelot, he needed a challenge to see what kind of a man he is. And maybe that's just, it's in there and I just didn't read it right.
And there's even multiple instances where, I mean, he obviously loses. Barry Keoghan takes the sash from him.
Is it time?
Go for it.
Okay. You said Keoghan. I said Keo at one time. It's Keown. Keeown. Keown. I know you're looking at me like I'm crazy. Go to pronounce Barry Keoghan on YouTube, and there's an interview with an Irish radio station, and they pronounce it just like that. And then you see it in a couple of those pronounce.com things said wrong, and people spelling it out.
Nice.
Keeown.
I love it. Okay, Barry Keoghan. I thought you were going to talk about Ralph Ineson or Ralph Ineson.
Whatever. That's too much for me. He's cool though. His voice is great.
Yeah, I don't think they did much to his voice.
No, his voice is great.
Yeah. So, also that was all prosthetics. There was no CGI associated with the Green Knight other than when they cut off his head, obviously. But Barry Keoghan, can't get used to it. Barry Keoghan takes the sash, and so he's without that sash during that time. And in fact, there's that 360-degree shot where he's tied up against the tree, and then it does like a pan all the way around, and then you see his skeleton. And as it pans, did you notice like the seasons changed as it panned?
Just like the circular thing in the play, in the puppet show.
Oh yeah, that's right, exactly. Oh man, I didn't put that together. That's really good. And then they twist it back, and he's obviously back again. But then he ends up getting another sash from the lady, I guess, the Lord and the lady, the lady of the castle closer to the end. So that is once again another talisman, another thing that is supposed to protect him in that instance. And so he goes into the Green Knight's chapel with a false sense of protection and with an out, with the thought that he's going to somehow get away from this. There's a couple of elements that he added to the film that were not in the poem, and I wanted to get your take on that. The Saint Winifred scene, which has Erin Kellyman as Winifred. She plays a woman who was beheaded. That wasn't in the poem, and it was just kind of added in a supplementary fashion. Do you think that like added to the film, or like, because it looked beautiful, but it was interesting that where it was placed.
So what we were talking about is a theme. So if the mother is connected to his challenge, and then the mistress is connected to his challenge, and then the lady later on is connected to his challenge, then what is the purpose of the Winifred scene?
I think it's him acting like a knight, him trying to be like a knight, him trying to be like, oh, I'm sorry that I'm sleeping in your bed. I will leave henceforth. And then she doesn't necessarily like give him an easy out. She's like, hey, so are you gonna help me? Because that's what a knight would do. And I need you to dive down into this pond/lake and get my head out of there. So yeah, I mean, that I think is the kind of like him being like, oh man, dang it, I'm trying to be like a knight. I guess I'll have to do this. And then when he's down there underneath the water, he kind of gets sucked in, and as opposed to like jumps in, he kind of gets sucked in. And then there's crazy cool light show down there. Also, it's a beautifully shot scene too. But
It
other than
really
that,
is. The
yeah,
whole sequence is well done.
yeah,
The whole her, how she looks, the way that they do when you figure out where she is on the bed afterwards, when he puts the
yeah.
head up there,
Oh,
it's all really well done. And I guess it comes back to I should know at this point. There's quests inside quests inside quests. When there's a major, you got to get the ring to Mordor, but there are little quests inside of
yeah.
that. And then there's 4 different stories about other quests going on and other hobbits doing things and other wizards doing things and Aragon and all these people doing things. So I guess that's you're right. I think it is just what is the right thing to do
Mm-hmm.
in that even though it's a ghost, even though he invaded a house that's obviously not been lived
Yeah.
in decades. I mean, there's no reason to be apologetic about that. He didn't know it. And then when he figures it all out, I guess he's also facing his fears because you got a ghost who's really good looking. And then you find out that she doesn't have a head, but you're looking at this really beautiful face. And you're thinking to yourself, wait, this is, if she doesn't have a head, where's your head? Your head's right there. I see your head. So it's got to be freaky deaky. So he has to overcome his own fears. And I guess it's little fears throughout the process of his quest that allows him to get to the Green Knight's chapel. But when we talk about the ending of the movie or closer to the end of the movie, why does he make the choices that he makes once he gets there?
Well, before we get there, I have a theory about the fox. I think the fox is his mom. And I think that that's a final test where the fox is kind of like, hey, right before he goes across that kind of creek riverbed area and he goes in towards the Knight's Chapel, and the fox is kind of like shaking him off. And then finally the fox just like straight out talks to him, like foxes do. And he's like, don't go in there. You don't want to go in there. And
You're gonna die.
yeah. So I think that's it's trying to give Gawain an out. Like at any moment, like he could just go back, and he could always go back, and he could say that he saw the Green Knight, and nobody would probably say any different. But he kept moving forward, and he kept pushing towards his inevitable end, and even at that point he was thinking, I've got this thing around my waist, I'm gonna be fine.
Well, I don't know if this is a far reach, but all of a sudden when you were talking, it dawned on me that that's part of Jesus's quest. He's tempted 3 times in the desert, and he succeeds 3 times. Maybe the fox, the Winifred, and maybe the lady, and the Lord or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe those are like 3 temptations, and maybe you're right. The fox represents an easy way out. You're right. No one's going to know at that point. Although technically speaking, he shouldn't be coming back at all.
But his mom knows that she gave him the sash, and there's other people. I mean, like, so it's kind of like, true. Yeah, everybody's, above board as far as like, oh yeah, you saw the Green Knight. Oh well, maybe you killed the Green Knight somehow. He could come up with whatever he wants, but yeah, he still pushes forward.
Which is exactly what happens. He doesn't turn away from the quest, and he conquers going into that lake to get a person's head, which I never would have done. I would go to the Green Knight Chapel before, and I would definitely make out with Joel Edgerton and Alicia Vikander way before I would go listening to what that fox had to say. I would have no problem with that part of the quest. That would be good. But then why, if he's accomplished all of this stuff, because it's sort of like, maybe the first part of the quest is his childhood, the middle part is his teenagehood, and the last part is coming into adulthood. So maybe it's a coming of age story as well. Although Dev Patel, who's superb in this, by the way, is a little older than that. Then why does he do what he does once he gets there?
First of all, the way that chapel scene is shot, it's markedly different than the rest of the film. They use this, what they were calling in some of the interviews I was reading, a tobacco leaf like filter. It's not sepia toned. It's a little bit earthier than that, I think. Like, it's not like a old timey photo. It's almost like the beginning of Stalker, actually, is what it looks like to me. But yeah, so that kind of a like deeply amber saturated film look. And so that is a big difference between that, and then you have all the lead up to the Green Knight showing up. But there's a hallucination of some kind, I guess, that he goes through.
25th hour.
Yeah. So there's that kind of hallucination that happens where he lives his life after running away, and realizing that there's a cost to that. There's a cost to not honoring his agreement to this night, and that he does inevitably become king, and he does inevitably marry some probably daughter of another kingdom so that the kingdoms could meet up and all of that. I mean, that's par for the course, I guess. But and then he does spurn the prostitute Alicia Vikander, but then realizes that when he's at the end, like at the very, very end, he's about to be killed, and he pulls that sash, and then his head's cut off. So he was just staving off his inevitable demise. But it was dishonorable, and it probably grated on him his whole life, his whole hallucinatory life. And he probably felt like it was worth honoring his commitment to the night by not having this protective blanket, by not, relying on the history that he had with his family, based on his family, to protect him, and by taking responsibility for his actions and for what he chose to do. Because nobody forced him to agree to that game, the Christmas game. He chose to do that out of his own hubris.
So one of the main themes is honor your word. So if you say you're going to do something, if you don't stick to that in your life will go one way, and ultimately at the end of your life, you're going to regret not sticking to your word. Even if sticking to your word. Okay,
I think it's be true to yourself. That's really what, it was about him and what he was doing.
So the Green Knight comes in, and all of those sound effects are great, by the way. The whole creaking of the tree and just everything about it.
And when he reaches
phenomenal.
out, to give, like, his arms sound like a tree twisting and creaking.
So great.
Oh man.
Yeah, it sounds like late night in the woods camping, and the wind is blowing. Yeah, it's so great. And the when he comes alive in the chapel, closer to the end of the film, is also the sound effects, everything, the way you can hear the wood hitting the metal, and the way he picks up his axe, all sounds good. Okay, so the Green Knight comes in, drops his little holly branch.
Means he comes in peace. That's what a holly branch means.
Okay.
According to the information that I read.
Oh, because I've read a bunch of different things of what that meant. And there's always the same, there's like 3 different things that people think that it means, and then it could mean any of this, it could mean none of this. We don't know. That's I mean, if you do research on it, that's what they say. They're like, oh, we're not sure.
Or maybe because it was Christmas? Holly Christmas?
Well, yeah, that's what I thought. I just thought he was, coming to present a gift to the king on Christmas Day.
He's like, where's the popcorn on the string? Like, what do you got, guys?
With the cranberries. Yeah.
That's right.
So he drops the holly branch, and then he says, this is my challenge. This is my Christmas game. And Dev Patel stands up and says, okay, but he presents what the challenge is before Dev Patel takes it, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or does he
everybody's silent around the round table, and nobody says anything. And then Dev Patel
the knight says that an eye for an eye, basically. Yeah. I hit you with the axe, I strike you, or you strike me, and then I get to strike you in a year. That's before Dev Patel agrees to it. So at that point, once Dev Patel stands up and says, I'll take that challenge, the point of the movie is you stick to your word no matter what, even if it means you're going to get beheaded in a year. A man's word is important. Because I was thinking, if it was that he didn't know the rules until he said, oh, okay, I'll take your challenge, and then he explained the rules, does that mean at that point, because you said be true to yourself. Yeah. So at that point, does Gawain go, never mind. No. I didn't know. I don't want to challenge. So he was being true to himself by saying yes to the challenge, knowing what the challenge was. And then if you're not true to yourself, your life doesn't play out the way it's supposed. Okay. Yeah.
But okay. Here's another thing to keep in mind, though, is at the very beginning, when he agrees to that, he's kind of in a rough spot. He's in a depressive state to a certain extent. Now, he did just get asked to sit next to King Arthur, so I'm sure that he was, a little happy about that or whatever. But he's also King Arthur's nephew and all that. But it seems like when Guinevere asks him, she's like, "Oh, I'm sure you have all kinds of stories," and he's like, "Not really." You can kind of get the feeling that he's like, "I haven't really done anything," and at that point, when the Green Knight comes in and is like, "I challenge all the," this is the biggest being in the room, this Green Knight, and he's got a god awful huge axe, and so that is imposing to anyone. And so when he challenges anyone to a duel, my guess is that Gawain thinks he's going to die. He thinks they're going to brawl it out, and he's not going to be as good of a swordsman as this huge Green Knight is with his axe, and that he's going to die. But it's going to be in front of the king and all of the Knights of the Round Table, and it's going to be a story that's told for ages. When Gawain fought the Green Knight and died valiantly. But that's not what happened. The Green Knight kneeled and turned his head
down
and put Gawain in a really tough position to be like, what are you gonna do? Like slice his arm or something? No, you're gonna have to follow through with this.
Pinky toe.
That's right. So
Later,
like,
dude.
you gonna flick his ear? I mean, I don't know what you're gonna do.
See you in a year, buddy.
So yeah, put him in a really tough position.
That's why I was asking about the sequence of events, because if he takes the challenge knowing it's blow to blow, then he knew that it wasn't going to be this big thing in this big story. He knew what was going to happen.
But he didn't know he was going to win, though. That's the thing. I think that's when he agreed to the duel. He probably thought it was a less than 50% chance he was going to win.
But he knew when he took the axe up and beheaded him that was what was going to happen to him in a year. So how did he not know that?
At that point, it's about honor, and it's about like, wow, now I've got all of these Knights of the Round Table, and they're watching me. What am I going to do? Like wuss out and not chop off this guy's head? It's kind of dumb when you think about it.
Yeah, it is totally dumb. Although it's a great excuse to bring out Excalibur and to have another person hold Excalibur. Yeah. And if that's the price of admission, then I would do the same thing, because I also think jumping into the lake is a little reminiscent of The Lady in the Lake from the Arthur story. I don't know if that's a connection or not, but it rang true to me when I was watching it, that reminded me of, there is a lady in the lake in this story of Gawain, and there is a lady in the lake in Arthur's story. Anyway, I just think Dev Patel is young, naive. He got the puffed out chest. I don't buy into the depressive, need to impress people thing that you were talking about. First of all, he wakes up on Christmas morning next to Alicia Vikander. How bad could your life be?
No, you're right.
Looking super, super sexy and cute in that short ass hair of hers. So what's the problem? What are you doing? I'm going to go to chapel. I'm going to go to church. So he gets a horse and he gets all ready, and she walks and he walks in front of her. They smile at each other, have a good Christmas, and then they're going to celebrate with the king. Well, he is, at least, because he's related to the king. How bad is his life? It's not that bad. When the king invites him to sit next to him, that's just like your favorite uncle finally paying attention to you at a wedding. And you're just like, I knew that guy was cool. That's it. That's all that was. Maybe I'm not looking as deep into it as you are, but I just think that why did none of those Knights of the Round Table stood up?
Yeah, because they knew they were going to lose.
Right. But smart. Somewhere in there was either somebody who fought with Lancelot or Lancelot. I think Lancelot was probably not there at this point.
He was waiting for Guinevere in his bedroom.
Well, how long did he have to wait? Because they're up in
age.
Some age.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, because at first I was like, why does Guinevere and King Arthur look like heroin addicts? Why do they look so burnt? They did look really burnt out.
They looked rough. Yeah.
They really did. And they wanted them to be aged, and they wanted even though they're probably in their late 40s, early 40s, somewhere in there, they've aged so much faster.
That's also old for back then.
Yeah, absolutely. It's decrepit for back then. And Dev Patel kind of is older for back then too. But if we're going on the idea that nobody really knows why this poem even exists, then we can do whatever we want.
The one thing I do want to talk about very quickly, which I thought was really cool, was how the lady took a picture of him by using camera obscura. That's the thing that we saw in Tim's Vermeer. and that what he thinks that Vermeer used to paint so accurately. But she did some sort of I don't know, she put some sort of a chemical or something on a slate or something, and that light allowed it to make a picture, which I thought was so cool. I'd never seen that before, but it was very painterly, her putting the water on there and the close-ups of the droplets and all that stuff. I mean, it's really cool. That character in general, the lady, how she's very she talks about, she has all those books. She talks about the books. You don't expect that kind of representation of women in that time period like that. A woman who's like, yeah, I've got all these books. I've read all of them. Sometimes I change them, just
I wrote a couple.
Yeah. If I don't like it, I'll just, just go in there and change it. So no big deal. But yeah, so that, I thought that was an interesting character trait to give that woman. And then what about the older woman with the eye covering in there?
There's a blind prophet in every one of these stories.
Do you think that the Lord and the lady saw her? Or do you think only Gawain saw her? Because they never interact with her.
Kind of like a Sixth Sense type of thing. No, but I'm thinking it now.
I know, right?
No, but
it seems
no,
weird.
I didn't. No, I didn't. Yeah, I loved it though. But that's sort of a slight negative for me for this film.
Mm-hmm.
The film is not surreal enough. It has surreal elements, and I think it just needed to go just that much further.
What if it was shot on film?
Well, you notice things like that. I hardly notice anything like that.
All right.
I noticed it once you pointed out to me, and I noticed things like when we first saw her, and I noticed how beautiful that nighttime sky was in the city, and you could see all that stuff. And then you started explaining to me, because digital cameras work differently, they absorb light differently, and they do everything differently, that you can pick up stuff with natural lighting. And that I did notice it, but I wouldn't have noticed that it was digital versus film. I don't know. No, it has to do with, you have that opening shot with him on the throne and the crown is descending on him. And it's a great shot. And then his head burst on fire, which is a very traditional, religious, symbolic flame on head thing. I mean, it's been done a gazillion times. Not to say that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's an image that we see a lot. So that to me said that this film was going to look and feel differently than any other quest film I've seen. Thus, the pace didn't bother me. The jutting off into a Lady in the Lake story, jutting off into whatever Joel Edgerton and the lady wanted him for, whatever that blind prophet was about. I just wish it had been more Luca Guadagnino and less Peter Jackson. Not that I dislike either of those two directors. I'm just saying, some things
You're saying
are
that
on the nose.
This lent itself to more of a Luca Guadagnino feel.
It felt like it could be what was the
Suspiria.
Suspiria. I couldn't think of that for the life of me. Not everything makes sense in that film. Not everything is logical, but it has a feeling to it.
Yep.
The whole way that institution, that dance institution, feels with those really high ceilings and that long 70s kind of staircase, it all has this feeling about it. It sets a tone. It sets a surreal tone to it, which adds to the dances and all the other stuff with what's going on in that film. This right here, it taps into it here and there. And I'm glad that it's there, but it's not heavy enough.
So the naked lady giants weren't surreal enough for you?
No, they were very quest-like. They were very, giants, blind prophets, giants, witches, all very on theme, all very much in these stories. What the big giant woman did was surreal. Like when she was kind of like messing with him and then leans down and like, what is she doing exactly? And why is she even doing it? To me, that's more interesting than a straight narrative where the mother does this, he does this, so forth and so on. But it's just, I would rather try to figure it out through imagery than be spoon-fed it. But sometimes when it's so surreal and it starts to become abstract, you don't have to explain it.
So,
It's
okay.
a feeling.
So what about the end of 2001, A Space Odyssey after Dave Bowman?
Love it. I understand everything about it.
Okay, so the moment he's in
get
that
it.
room, you get it. You get all of the
Yep.
symbolism, the representation, all of that. And that's not spoon-fed. That's
No, not at all.
It's yeah.
He's a man who sees outside time.
No, I mean that's fine. I'm just trying to like to figure out what the bounds of kind of what you're talking about are. Like it's
That's a perfect example.
Okay.
Perfect example. A lot of the stuff in Eyes Wide Shut, if we're going to go back to Kubrick, since we're already talking about him earlier, some stuff in The Shining is straight out surreal. What the hell is that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably why I'm reading it, because I'm dying to know what influenced Kubrick into making this Stephen King story. Yeah. And I also want to know why Stephen King really doesn't like his version and what the difference is and all that other stuff. Plus, I'm a Stephen King fan. Win, win, win. So far, I don't get any of it. I don't understand why Kubrick looked into it. I don't understand.
He got a galley copy of The Shining. He read The Shining before it even came out. When a book is being put together, before it goes to the printers, they have these galley copies, which is just all the pages in order in a very loosely bound manner. Hey, check out my new book before it comes out, and then people can kind of whatever give you feedback or whatever. But he got an advanced copy essentially of The Shining, and that's when he decided that he wanted to do that film.
Okay, well, we can talk about that later. We can do page to screen.
So
we can do another page to screen.
There we go.
But the point is this: the surreal stuff that's in The Shining, the big bloodbath coming down from the elevator, the guy who's sitting on the bed and the other animal,
the furry
looking person, whatever they're doing. I think it has purpose based on some of the stuff I've already read in the book, but I'm not sure, not yet. That is surreal stuff, but it has a feeling to it. It might not be able to be explained, and you might not be able to say what you feel in words, but you get a sense of something from it when you see it. Just like the dance in Suspiria. Mm-hmm. You get a feeling from it. And you get a feeling from a lot of things in The Green Knight, but I just wish it was more that than me trying to figure out what exactly. It has more of a straight edge narrative to it that makes me go, okay, well, what is the themes? What am I taking from it? What is the reason why we're watching this? And maybe there isn't one, but a surreal, abstract, avant-garde film wouldn't care if there was a reason. It would just be like, here's the image, take what you... Hereditary. Perfect example of a straight narrative that really... Midsommar. Straight narrative, and then boom, we go into a place we are never going to understand and never figure it out. Never. But you stop thinking and start feeling, and you come out of Midsommar with a feeling, whether or not you can express it or not, but the Green Knight just is, it's almost there.
So, okay, so you're saying that The Green Knight, and I would tend to agree with you. I don't think it bothers me as much because I'm more of a thinking person than a feeling person. I mean, I'm not an automaton, but come on. But I do appreciate the craft of making a film and of all of the pieces that are put together. Like I look at the Lego set and I see what it is and I see what it's made of, and I enjoy both of them equally. But I understand where you're coming from. To me, the only thing that bothered me, it wasn't the pace. The pace was fine. It wasn't the tone. The tone was good for me. It was the length. And it's weird because you would think that pace and length are related, but I felt like there was too much in the movie. And I felt like they could have gotten rid of something to get us to the Green Knight's Chapel faster, because I loved the end part. I loved the kind of hallucination, and then him deciding to take off the wrap, and the Green Knight's reaction, and the cut to the title card. I loved it. I loved all that. But I felt the length of this film versus other movies that I've seen even recently that are long.
See, I think that's what's interesting about us. Well, let me pat ourselves on the back. I think it's interesting that we're both saying the same thing, but just from a different point of view.
Yeah.
You're talking about the length. I'm talking about the surreal qualities of the film versus the straight narrative. Maybe if it was one or the other, the length of the film wouldn't seem as long to you, because I didn't think that it was long. And slow has now become an adjective to describe a film in a critical manner.
Mm-hmm.
But purposefully paced is a better way to put it for me to understand when you say slow, because most people think that that's a bad thing, that a film is so slow. And I'm like, it's not slow. It's purposely paced. Punch Drunk Love. Some people think that film is slow. And I'm like, I can't. I'm like, what film are you watching? Okay, whatever. I try not to be condescending.
You should just channel your inner Philip Seymour Hoffman and say, shut up, shut up. Because that's what he tells when they're on the phone. It's like,
I love it later on when Adam Sandler just like looks at him. He's like, okay.
And he's got the phone in his hand that they were talking on. He took it across multiple states to find him. It's great.
Okay. Oh, it's so great. I'm wondering in a couple of years, if I see this movie again, maybe the poetry, not necessarily the poetry of the original poem, but the poetry of the film will ring truer to me this time. Because a quest movie has all these things in it. Mm-hmm. It just does. So you're never going to get from point A to point B quickly. You're just not. It took 3 books to get that damn ring to Mordor. And in the first book, it takes like 9 months for it to get out of the Shire. I know that in this film, and I can sense it, that the artistry and the poetry hooks up with the narrative and the story at some point where I'm missing out on it. And it could be me. And I will confess to this. I have been obsessed with my phone recently, and social networking and YouTube and rabbit holes and quickly paced snippets. And 3 minutes is really a long time now. And I'm wondering, have I trained myself to not be able to sit through a 2-hour and 10-minute movie? Because that's not a long time for a movie. Yeah. And I'm wondering, and I'm giving myself a rationalization here and a justification. We haven't been able to sit in a movie. I never feel the urge to pull out my phone in a movie. All of those filmmakers that we've talked about, and I think Lowry falls into this category as well. I think he's going to continue on making interesting films, and one day they will be talking about him like they talk about Fincher or Kubrick. Maybe. Is it the filmmaker's responsibility to make sure that he engages you on some level and keeps you engaged? And is that possible? Like, is that something? He probably doesn't even think about stuff like that. But is it because the film doesn't engage me? Or is it because I've trained myself to be scatterbrained? Or am I thinking too much about it? Or was it not there? Call me in 5 years.
Yeah.
I'll let you know.
Well, you're right. I mean, yeah, our attention spans have definitely decreased, I'm sure, in general. But at the same time, I just watched Doctor Strangelove all the way through, and I never looked at my phone. So, I mean...
That's because you're Mr. Roboto.
No. That's because that's one of the greatest movies of all time. But that's just like my opinion, man.
I think this movie's worth delving into. There is stuff here. But I can tell you, when I came out of A Ghost Story, I think I understood the universe.
Nice.
I think I understood what he was saying. And there's a scene in there that's really so great. And I really want to see it again now. And I'd like to see if there's a thumbprint, how much of an auteur this guy is. I think he has potential.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
David Lowery, he has potential. You've heard it here first. All right. So
don't nobody got on this stuff.
You have don't sing anymore, or else we'll have to like pay Styx or something. But okay.
Who I love, by the way.
All right. You can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search for Actor and Engineer Podcast, and we'll see you next time.